This enormous tower in the shape of a lotus was built in the centre of Colombo with Chinese investment cash before the economic crisis engulfed Sri Lanka. It's become quite literally a landmark of Chinese influence on this island. The International Monetary Fund has agreed a $3 billion bailout to help the Sri Lankan people. Yet the bailout money won't actually arrive until China agrees to a restructuring of its $7 billion of loans to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's central bank governor admits the agreement is taking longer than hoped.
When we thought we should be able to get the assurances within about 3 months, so that we were hoping to get the program unlocked from the IMF somewhere in December. For whatever reason that there was a delay. The sooner they give us financial assurances, that would be better for both, as a creditor, as a debtor. That will help for us to start repaying their obligations sooner than later.
Newsnight was here 6 months ago investigating the reality of Chinese investment in this country. Cricket stadiums, hospitals, airports. China has also made sizable loans to many other developing countries. Beijing is believed to be anxious about the precedent a Sri Lanka debt restructuring will set. But the US ambassador to Sri Lanka today warns China's prevarication on debt restructuring is now harming the country.
Beijing has said they are a friend of Sri Lanka, and I'm sure the Sri Lankan people would love to see that turn into action and make sure that there is not a delay and that Beijing really responds quickly without delay in terms of providing those financial assurances. Sri Lanka does not have time to delay. They need these assurances immediately. And we've seen, again, delays in Zambia and Chad and other countries where for one reason or another it's been held up. And China has been the spoiler. So again, for the sake of the Sri Lankan people, we certainly hope the PRC is not a spoiler as they proceed to attain this IMF agreement.
Yet, it's more complicated than just waiting for China. Another stakeholder looms large over this land.
This rubble over here, this is going to be a new container terminal operated by a Chinese company. But if we swing round here, just a few hundred meters across the water, we can see land which is being reclaimed for another container terminal, but this one will be operated by an Indian company. These two nations are also competing in other ports around Sri Lanka for investment. And what all this illustrates is that these two new Asian superpowers are vying for influence on this island, not only over the country's politics, but its infrastructure as well.
Sri Lanka also needs India, another major lender to the country, to agree to write down its loans to unlock the IMF bailout. And here some see geopolitics as the barrier, and the question of who will have the most influence over the Sri Lanka that ultimately emerges from this crisis.
It's a preoccupation here, this constant battle for influence. I think every player, big or small, recognizes that Sri Lanka has a fantastic advantage in terms of location, strategic location, in terms of transshipment routes. So there is logic in that interest, but we know when big players like India and China come in, it's more than just the logistics of it. It's definitely strategic. I think there is this wait and watch approach. Every step taken now could have a bearing on what happens later to the individual relationship that these countries have.
At Sri Lankan weddings, traditional local folk dances often open the ceremony. But this troupe of dancers told us they are nearly always asked to put on an Indian Bollywood show too. So this is the complex dance in which Sri Lanka finds itself involved. Its immediate future and recovery seems blocked, or at least held up, by one of the big geopolitical power rivalries of the 21st century between China and India. And other smaller countries might find themselves in a similar position in the coming years if they too follow Sri Lanka into default.
We look for more coordination within the international community, not less, as we look towards how we can support countries in debt distress, help them get back on their feet, but in a way that the reforms will be long-lasting and not returning to the same cycle of debt distress that we've seen everywhere.
Long queues at the Colombo Emigration Office are a sure indication of a still badly ailing economy.
This is what can happen when a country's economy implodes. You get mass economic migration. A record 311,000 Sri Lankans left the country last year. And this emigration has actually been encouraged by the country's president. He wants Sri Lankans like these to leave the country, earn foreign currency and send it back to Sri Lanka so the country can afford vital food and medicine supplies. So tell us about where you and your family would like to go.
The UK, because my cousin is there. She's in Kent, so I'm planning to move there for the moment. And I hope she will help me to find a place. Since I have 2 kids, it's very young, I don't want them to suffer anymore in this country.
Hopefully, we are looking at New Zealand, Australia or UK.
Would you prefer to stay in Sri Lanka ideally?
Yeah, definitely, because here we are more stabilized. We have our families, cousins to friends to everyone. So if we are moving to another country, definitely we have to start from the very beginning.
The emigration of these skilled workers could benefit Sri Lanka in the short term, but many fear the longer term scarring effects will be deep. And so, Sri Lanka is a country that finds itself waiting for geopolitical rivalries to allow it to recover. Waiting for the chance to leave this crisis behind.